Welcome. My name is Peter Strong. I provide Skype counseling therapy for anxiety and also for the treatment of depression and many other emotional problems that really benefit from the techniques of mindfulness therapy, which is what I teach online. So many people like the freedom offered by online therapy via Skype. You need to use Skype or FaceTime or similar video platforms so that you can see each other. That's really quite important. If you can see each other, then in my experience there's no difference in the effectiveness of online therapy and online counseling relative to meeting in person. So the focus of mindfulness therapy is to teach you how to use mindfulness to work with your anxiety or depression or any other form of emotional suffering to facilitate its healing. So most people that I see suffer from anxiety. This is a very common condition that affects many people. And really, it's not that difficult to transform anxiety and to break free from anxiety when you learn how to work with your emotions consciously using mindfulness. So the most essential thing to do when you're working with anxiety is to learn how to change the anxiety thoughts, those thoughts that feed your anxiety, how to change them into mental objects that you can witness, that you can see consciously, but as an observer. This is the key part of the mindfulness training, is to learn to see thoughts as objects rather than blindly believing them, blindly identifying with those thoughts and beliefs and becoming overwhelmed by them. So the greatest problem is this unconscious process that we call reactive identification. Thoughts in themselves do not cause anxiety. That's a common misconception. Thoughts in themselves have no power whatsoever until you identify with them, until you take them to be truth, until you believe them in this sort of blind, unconscious manner. That's when the thoughts and beliefs take on power and will create that anxiety. So learning to disidentify with thoughts is very important, and that's a central focus. This does not mean trying to get rid of the thoughts or trying to avoid the thoughts in any way. If you try to get rid of thoughts or you try to not think about those thoughts, then that will of course cultivate more fear in the mind, which will feed the thoughts. But when you can embrace the thoughts like objects and not identify them, when you can embrace them completely, then that is a process that does not involve fear and will not feed those anxiety-producing thoughts. If you do not feed the anxiety, then it will begin to change and heal. It will start a process of resolution, as we call this in mindfulness therapy. So non-identification, seeing thoughts clearly as objects in the mind, is very important. And we can then start to interact with those objects and help them heal, largely by working with their imagery, you can move objects, you can move those thoughts. So anxiety is very often produced when there are too many anxiety-producing thoughts chaotically operating in the mind. We're simply overwhelmed by the sheer number of them in essentially a very small space. That's what really fuels anxiety. But that's imagery based. That's the imagery at work right there. So anxiety is produced not by thoughts, but by the lack of space around those thoughts. So when we train using mindfulness to work with our anxiety, one of the central things we do is learn how to move those thoughts further away to restore that space. So a typical exercise would be to identify a thought and then move it and place it at a lower level. If you place it on the ground at a lower level, it will have much less power than if it is operating at the level of the mind. If it's crowded into your head, then that gives it power. But if you move it and put it on the floor, that takes away its power. And generally, if you create more and more space around the thoughts, that takes away the power of those thoughts to create anxiety. So working with imagery is a very powerful and very direct way of working with anxiety. And I will teach you how to do this during our Skype counseling therapy sessions together. The other thing that we need to do, besides changing the imagery, is changing the relationship to our thoughts from one of fear to one of compassion. So this is where we learn to sit with those thoughts. This is the basic central teaching in mindfulness. Sit with the thoughts with equanimity, without reacting to them and without identifying with them. And then we respond with compassion, which is really seeing that the thoughts are trying to heal, and how can we help them heal? Changing their imagery is a primary part of that process of helping them to heal. So changing the imagery of anxiety thoughts is actually an act of compassion. But also building a relationship of friendliness with those thoughts instead of fear is extremely important for overcoming this basic fear reaction that simply amplifies the anxiety. If you can see the thoughts as being really like small entities that are themselves in pain and need you to help them heal, that action of friendliness will facilitate their healing and allow them to heal much faster than if you try to resist the thoughts or run away from them or distract yourself from them. So we have to build this relationship based on friendliness, which is also another key characteristic of mindfulness. So mindfulness is this combination of equanimity, of compassion, of friendliness, and this fearlessness that comes with that state of mind that as you cultivate it. When you are able to work in this way with your anxiety, you will greatly accelerate its healing. And the primary mechanism that we develop in doing this is to meditate on your thoughts and on your emotions so that we can build this mindfulness-based relationship that's based on those qualities of equanimity, compassion, and friendliness. If you'd like to learn more about the mindful approach to working with anxiety, and you like the idea of therapy via Skype, then do please reach out to me and ask any questions you have and tell me more about your particular struggles, and I'll be happy to explain to you more about how we can help you heal your anxiety using mindfulness. This approach is really effective. In my opinion, it is more effective than conventional talk therapy, and it's certainly much more effective than medications, which do nothing to change the underlying psychology of anxiety, the relationship that you have with your thoughts and with the emotion itself. This is much more important, and this is what will lead to the healing of anxiety. Anxiety cannot heal if you do not change the way you relate to your emotions and thoughts. Medications simply interrupt that process of learning how to relate to your mind more effectively. So if you'd like to learn more about how to overcome your anxiety using Skype counseling therapy based on mindfulness, then please email me and let's schedule a Skype therapy session. Thank you.